So I've done my presentation on bad parenting and juvenile delinquency. I was lucky enough to find a lot of information. The first person I'm going to quote from is Gottfredson and Hershey, 1990. They posited that it was bad parenting affects delinquency through its impact on low self-control, the differential association social learning proposition that bad parenting affects delinquency through its impact on aggressive attitudes, and whether low self-control and aggressive attitudes each uniquely predict delinquency. Gottfredson and Hershey believe that children in an unstructured home life do not develop coping skills that lead to self-control, and therefore are more likely to engage in high-risk activities. According to Gottfredson and Hershey, 1990 and 1995, as a matter of fact, all of the characteristics associated with low self-control tend to show themselves in the absence of nurturance, discipline, or training. Bad parenting reinforces negative behavior by not disciplining aggressive behavior or rewarding them by giving the child what it wants when the child demands it. Slabby and Gura, 1988, have noted a link between aggressive behavior and criminal behavior. The parents attempt to control the child by spanking or beating them, and they increase this corporal punishment when it fails to make a change in the child. Lawrence Steinberg, PhD, professor of psychology at Temple University, has determined that there is a direct link between young people who are raised in violent, abusive, hostile homes, or if the parents are disengaged, are more prone to violence themselves. Perhaps because they have seen this behavior as acceptable. This is known as a cycle of violence. There's also a link between poor parenting and personality development, in controlling their emotions, thus causing aggressive behavior. And children exposed to violence often see the world as a violent place, and that a person's behavior toward the youth is seen as hostile when it was not intended. The mental health of young people from dysfunctional families is also at risk. They have conduct disorder, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and substance abuse, consequently making them prone to antisocial behavior. Another link to poor parenting is the academic failure. Antisocial and aggressive behavior often leads to trouble in school, and troubled youths tend to find friends who are also troubled, leading to more antisocial behavior. This leads to peer pressure, which creates groups of youths doing things that are risky and antisocial that they would not do on their own. The studies by Lawrence Steinberg have shown that these predictors were identical over all ethnic and socioeconomic groups. Lawrence Steinberg was quite concerned with the amount of disengaged parents in their study. 1/4 of the students picked their own classes. The study was of 20,000 students from 9 high schools. 1/4 of the students picked their own classes without parental input. 30% had no idea how 30% of parents had no idea how their children were doing in school. 1/3 of the parents had no idea how their children spent their free time, and 1/4 of the students said there was no family recreation, and 30% said only 30% said that their parents talked to them every day. Patrick Fagan, PhD, 1993, states that the official Washington view was to give more money, but he shows that America's crime rate increases during economic booms, and when we went through the Great Depression, the crime rate dropped. Crime rates rose between 1965 and 1974 as incomes grew, and during the recession in 1982, crime rates dropped. Robert J. Sampson says that the reason that African Americans commit more crime is because historically the homes are more unstable and the family bond is not there. Dr. Fagan goes on to say that the stages that lead to aggression or low self-control early infancy, when children should develop empathy. If the early home life is unstable or abusive, the child fails to form the necessary bond and fails to feel secure and safe within a family or community. He also says that children that have been neglected and rejected at home gravitate to others who've been neglected themselves, which leads to delinquency. There's overwhelming evidence to show that criminal behavior can be traced to deprivation of parental love, and the family life is chaotic. This often leads to aggression and hostility toward others outside the family. By the age of 6, aggression and free-floating anger are already formed. Children react to quarreling parents by disobeying, hitting other children, and being more antisocial with their peers. And angry parents tend to vent on one child more than another. This parental hostility shapes the future delinquent. Inconsistent parenting, family turmoil, and economic hardships and mental illness can all shape a young child into aggressive, hostile behavior by the age of 5. 4/5 of the children who will become criminals will be labeled antisocial by the age of 11. 2/3 of antisocial 5-year-olds will be delinquent by age 15. Research dating back to the 19th century, officials reported that to the legislature in 1829 and 1830 did a study of the biographies of incarcerated men, suggesting that the broken families from divorce, incarceration, and death led to undisciplined children who later became criminals. When a child lacks the emotional attachment to a stressed-out mother, it affects their ability to empathize with others, which can lead to violent criminal behavior. Ralph Lauber, professor of psychiatry, psychology, and epidemiology at the Western Psychiatric Institute at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, states, "A close and intense relationship between a boy and his father prevents hostility and inappropriate aggressions." Elijah Anderson, professor of sociology at the University of Pennsylvania, has noted that these young men, they're very sensitive for their need for respect, and display a demeanor which communicates deterrent aggression, not unlike the behavior that causes normal peers to reject them in grade school. This message of this body language triggers rejection from the adult community. Harvard professors Sheldon and Eleanor Gluck in the 1950s found that 1/3 of delinquent boys in their sample came from homes with spouse abuse. The Cambridge Somerville Youth Study found that the incidence of delinquency was higher in intact homes with high incidence of conflict and neglect. Professor Kevin Wright, in his review of the literature for the Department of Justice, lists 21 other major studies that clearly show the link between parental conflict and delinquency. The more frequent or intense the conflict, the more the child is hurt emotionally. The lack of parenting skills is often due to a lack of knowledge. These parents may have had bad parents themselves, creating a cycle of delinquent behavior. All that is needed is an investment and affection for the child, and watching his behavior and correcting him when he's wrong. Professor Fagan in 1993 goes on to say that a host of other studies confirm that good supervision is at least as powerful as parental emotional attachment to the child, and other forms of indirect control. Monitoring fills the child's need for parental attention, moral education, and correction. So there is hope.